Hey, this is John with Two Moose Home Inspections. Welcome to the April 2021 in-service training. So one of the things you might be asking yourself is what happened to the March in-service training? And the answer is this is actually the March in-service training. So instead of calling this March, we're calling it April. And the reason why is because yes, this does cover everything that we did during March. However, we don't normally have our in-service training until the first week of the next month. And then also, we don't publish the video until like a day or two after that. So with that being said, even though this is all the content from March, in fact, it makes more sense to just call this the April in-service training because the in-service training actually occurs on April. And as it turns out, the video also would then get published in April. So I think it just makes more sense. So we're kind of skipping March and we're just moving straight into April. But there's a lot of things that I want to cover, So first things first, let's jump into Notion. This is where we have all of our policies, procedures, all of our stuff. And we're going to jump into our in-service training. You're going to see that March is actually missing. So there is no March and we are just going to click right there on the April in-service training. So the first thing in the in-service training that you're going to notice is that we have a safety topic, and the safety topic is that the first aid kits have arrived. It has been a long time coming to have those safety kits arrive. In fact, it has been months. It's been months that they've been back ordered. I mean, who would have known a global pandemic would cause some kind of shortage with, medical supplies? Weird, right? So anyway, what we got was this right here. So each inspector has this first aid kit right here, which has just about, I would say, everything that you probably need to have in order to be successful in an emergency situation. So in general terms, this is a metal case. It has a gasket around it, so that way nothing bad can happen to the contents of it. Extremely, extremely robust. Very, very pleased to have this. So this right here is an ANSI level or Class B, ANSI Class B safety kit. This is about as good as we can get, and the ANSI is kind of the governing body in a way of like what kind of safety kits we should have. So this is far above and beyond what we need for safety, but you might already know from our previous in-service trainings that all we do is go above and beyond with whether it be the inspection, the tools we use, or are the safety for ourselves, our realtors, or anybody that is there, such as the buyer, the agent, or tenants that are there at the house. We just want to make sure that if an emergency were to be able to happen, that we'd be able to change from being a home inspector to being a first responder, because really in most situations just those first couple seconds really matter. So that's the first news that we have. If we jump back over into Notion, what you're going to see is where did the March in service go? I think we already answered that at the very beginning. And then the new template, 4,500 issues. Oh man, so this is a topic that I could speak for a long time about. But basically, the long story short about this is that now our inspectors have the ability that we can go directly to a home inspection, and the inspection report is being written on our iPads. And so basically, whenever I first started the business back in 2018, we were using iPads, and the idea was, hey, we're going to take these iPads and we are going to do the entire inspection report on the iPad. Well, the problem is that there's really no just like inspection report that you can buy. You kind of have to go from your training and kind of create a template that you can then work off of. Of course, whenever I first started, the template was extremely weak. And then as the years went on, we had maybe 2,000 deficiencies. But 2,000 deficiencies, it might seem like a lot, but it's nothing. It's literally nothing. And so I spent the last 3.5 months, so about last 3.5 months working on this new template, almost 200 hours just completely dedicated to updating the template. Because I think whenever you purchase a home inspection, it's great that we're coming out and, that's me. Hey, I'm John, or I have Shay, or I have Jeremy. We have our inspectors that come out and do the inspections. But the reality is that you are paying for a product, and that product is our inspection report. And the better that I can make the inspection report template, the better that your report will be and the more worthwhile that report will be for you. And so basically now, whenever we go, we used to just take pictures with the iPad and show you everything, but now we can take pictures and we're writing the report at the same time. And so in the past, what we had was that we would say, hey, we are going to get you that inspection report, and we're going to get you that report within 24 hours, let's say. And so then the inspector would be there. We would be at the inspection for 2, 3, maybe 4 hours. But realistically, the average inspection, I think we end up, you know, with report writing time and all that kind of stuff is just about 5 hours per inspection. So whenever we do 2 inspections, that used to be a 10-hour day. Now, easily we should be able to get that down to an 8-hour day, hopefully, with a better quality product is what we're looking for as well, because then right there, whenever we see the issue, we can add additional notes, deficiencies, whatever it may be, and we are ready to give you that inspection report as soon as we upload those 360 photos. So in general terms, I'm just ecstatic. I'm through the moon. So now we have 4,500 deficiencies. And again, 4,500 deficiencies may seem like a lot, and it is not. It's probably about a third of where we are going to be in the next 2 years. It's probably about a third of that. And so then it's like, well, how do you keep track of this? Well, as an inspector, having the template right there on our iPad is really going to help us out, make sure we are able to say, yes, for sure, whenever you look at this deck, if it is 30 inches and above, we're going to need a guardrail. And if it is 30 inches or below, then we don't, or if it's less than 30 inches, then we don't need to have a guardrail, and be able to have those very, very specific numbers and things that we can reference to make sure that a deficiency that we think is a deficiency is actually a deficiency. We will then have all the numbers that are hard enough to remember about if there's an electrical line going over top of your head and it's over top of a walkway versus a driveway versus a roof near a window. We have now all of that data right there on our iPad. And so it has been just one heck of an adventure sitting in front of my computer doing research and research and research to create a really good product. And we aren't even there yet. I don't want to give anything away for next month's in-service training, but there is a lot to come to the type of content that is going to be found inside of the inspection report as well. That will be the next phase into the inspection report to make sure you have the best possible report that you can get whenever we give you one. So yeah, that's basically the template. It has been an insane process, but it is so amazing to be able to go write the report as we're doing it. I can put in so much more detail, so much more information. I can make sure the photos are good and that I'm really giving you the story and the narrative that you need to be having to understand exactly what's going on with the house. So the next thing that we have, I guess whenever we talk about is, you know, using the iPad. So now the iPads, so everybody got an updated iPad, which is nice. So all the iPads that we had are now no longer a part of us doing inspections. They're now being used for other features, such as like whenever I record videos like this being used as my teleprompter. This particular one, the teleprompter is to make sure that I have on the screen what I need, but the iPads have been, you know, repurposed, and now each member of the team, so that's 3 brand new iPads with cellular service. And so as we're writing the report and as we're taking photos, we have it set up that every 5 minutes we're pushing to the cloud. So that way, if the inspector drops their iPad and it gets snapped right in half, it's not a big deal because we've only lost 5 minutes worth of data. They can pull out their cell phone. They can start taking the photos with their cell phone using the app on their cell phone and go from there. So then why don't we just use a cell phone? Well, the reason, and I guess I can just bring you up in the full screen again. So the reason that we are using an iPad as opposed to a cell phone is really for no other reason than, yes, a cell phone can handle it. The text is a little bit smaller, so it's nice having a little bit more screen real estate. But for two main reasons. One is the perception. If you have an inspector and they're just standing there and you walk around the corner and you see an inspector on their cell phone, you probably are like, what is this dude doing on his cell phone? I paid good money for him to be here doing an inspection, when in reality, he's literally typing up your report and taking photos. Or I can have an inspector right there with an iPad, and it is very clear this is a work device and that this work device is being used to do work for you, the customer. So that's the main thing, is perception. The second part is if I'm like, hey, look at this deficiency, and I'm showing it to you on this little itty bitty, cell phone, that's not going to work. But if I have a bigger iPad, then I can be like, hey, look at this deficiency, and you can see it more clearly. We can zoom into the pictures, and we can kind of make more of a better show of what it was that we found in the moment. So that way you don't necessarily have to give us a call and say, hey, I don't know what this is. It kind of freaks me out, because we're going to take care of you. And same as what we're going to go through right now with some of the things that we found in our reports. There are things that you're going to see that in your report that might make you nervous, but maybe it's not that big of a deal. So basically, if this is your first time being to one of our in-service trainings, congratulations for making it this far so far, but we have a long ways to go. This is going to be at least an 1.5 hour long video, if not closer to 2 hours, and we are just going to try to push through everything. And the idea is that whenever we have new inspectors come onto the team, not only do we put them through 90 credit hours worth of training minimum just to start their field training, but then we have a whole field training course. And then in addition to the field training course, we're doing monthly in-service trainings, which include this kind of stuff. And this kind of stuff is the stuff that caught us off guard, put us at risk, or was something that we want to make sure that we don't miss in the future to make sure we're giving the best possible inspection. And so everything that we have here either is, wow, that was different, or that was unique, or this is something we really want to drill into our inspectors' heads to make sure that they are 100% aware of what this deficiency is, how to find it, and what to look for. It's just keeping things fresh in a person's mind, so that way whenever they go out, it's almost a game of, hey, last time, like for instance, last time, whenever we were looking, the vent was inoperable. And so now it's like, hey, I'm going to be the next one to find the inoperable vent, you know, or whatever it may be. And so as we push through these things, it kind of almost becomes a competition of like, hey, have you found one of these yet? Oh, you haven't found one of these? And then the next time you're just like hyper vigilant, being very aware of like what other inspectors have found and what's important, and wanting to be the one that's able to show some things. Like Shay, for instance, found some major foundation issues with this one house, and he was so excited to be able to present that here in the in-service training, because now that is there forever, and all of our inspectors watch our in-service training, and you can even go back to it for further review. But anyway, I've talked a lot, not a surprise. So let's get into it here. So ventilation vent inoperable. So basically, whenever you flip the light switch, the vent doesn't turn on. So it could be that the motor's bad. It could be that it's been jammed up. It could just be a whole bunch of corrosion or whatever. But you can also see that around the cover plate, there's a significant amount of just corrosion. And why is that? Because in that area, it's supposed to be venting out the air, but it's not. And so now we have a lot of corrosion because we have increased humidity, and that is making contact with the metal, and that's no good. Moving on from there. Whenever we have electrical coming in and, you know, you're talking 30 amps, 40 amps, 50 amps, whatever it may be, we really want that wire to be inside of a conduit. And in fact, on top of this water heater, it was specifically designed that it should be inside of a conduit. And you can see that all they have is a standard Romex, and Romex is just a type of brand of wire, but basically just a standard wire coming out of there, and it doesn't have any metal protection, sheathing, anything. And so that particular wire, if it were, which this water heater is being used for storage, if something were to pull on it, nick it, or whatever, then that could have exposed electrical conductors at 20, 30, 40 amps. And knowing that it only takes 0.7 amps across your chest to kill you, I mean, it's crazy not to put something like this inside of a conduit whenever you're pushing that much electricity. So something to be mindful of. And that's an easy fix in general. So why would I tell you that the oven is dirty? Well, because if the oven is dirty and it can't easily be fixed or whatever it may be, then you are dealing with the repair of that oven, the cleaning of the oven, or maybe you just need to put this into, you know, talk to your realtor and have them put this into the closing documents to say, hey, they will clean the oven, because who wants to deal with somebody else's mess? You know, it's just not, it's not fun to show up to a house and have to deal with someone else's mess. So now on the refrigerator, same idea, is that on the inside, we were actually missing a lot of things. There were some broken pieces and this and that, whatever. But on the inside of the refrigerator, there was a lot of damage. So this particular shelf on the door, as the door is being opened, all of the condiments would fall out because it no longer has that bar that goes around it. Now, is that bar replaceable? This was an older refrigerator, so you probably couldn't go to the manufacturer and say, hello, I would like to have this bar, you know, for this refrigerator model from 1990, whatever. Not going to happen. If you actually wanted to use that door, well, you'd either have to make something yourself or you would have to replace the entire refrigerator. And so the question is, do you need to replace the refrigerator? The answer is no. You definitely don't need to replace the refrigerator. But if you're the type of person who wants to, I don't know, use the refrigerator the way it was designed, then it might be good to know this so that way you can negotiate or just have an understanding that, hey, the refrigerator is not going to work the way I want and I might have to replace it with something else in the future. So then as we move up, so there's no guardrail here. Anytime that there are 4 or more stairs, there needs to be a handrail, guardrail, whatever it may be, just to make sure that you are safe. And so the idea is put yourself in the mindset of a 6-year-old version of yourself, a 90-year-old version of yourself. And if you're walking on those stairs, would you want to have a guardrail? And the answer is yes. You would absolutely love to have a guardrail. So the next thing is a door with forced entry. So basically, you know, somebody just like kicked open the door and that was that. And if you kick open the door, that's fine. You know, we can fix it. And as you can see, it was fixed. But the reality is that door will never be as secure as it once was. So if that door has been kicked open for whatever reason, then we really need to replace the entire jamb. And the jamb is the part that goes all around that door. That needs to be replaced. And there are ways around it, but in general terms, you really need to replace that jamb. It's just, you know, again, one of those things that doesn't matter. Well, it's not like the door's not working. However, the door's not working as well as it probably should. So then if we take a look, this floor is sloped. And so this was like a little punch out off of the side of this pre-manufactured home. And so here was the normal floor and here was its floor. and the floor just kind of drooped down just a little bit. And that is kind of concerning because did they use the proper nailing schedule? Did they put in enough nails? Did they use structural screws? Did they cantilever or sister out those floor joists the way they're supposed to? And what other issues are going on? So it's just one of those things that if that floor is sloped, there's probably a reason for it. Now, embarrassingly enough, for the longest time, I didn't have a level that would be able to, show me whatever. So now all of the inspectors have a digital level, and I've actually had to take, like a chapstick or something and show on video, hey, this is rolling whatever. But now we have a very clear, this is 2 degrees off, this is 3 degrees off, this is 4 degrees off, or using a bubble level, a digital bubble level. Really, really happy that we upgraded to those tools. Just because whenever you come across something, I want to be able to express that and show you very, very clearly where and what the issue is. But again, that issue, I don't know how fixable it is, but it also doesn't seem like that big of a deal. It just seems like this particular house, which this is a part of it, just had some fit and finish issues where they got this pre-manufactured home, but maybe it wasn't, assembled 100% correctly. And the great example about this is, let's just say that, that these stairs were 36 inches wide going down. Well, but the wall was, let's say, 40 inches. So there was like a 2-inch gap on either side of this particular set of stairs. And so every single stair. So how would you fix this? Well, do you need to fix it? The answer is no, you don't need to fix it. But how would you fix it? And the way you would fix it is you'd pull up that carpet, which isn't a big deal because you can put the carpet back down, but then you need to remove all of the treads, all the flat parts of the stairs, remove those and put in pieces of wood that are large enough to actually span the entire width, and then put the carpet back down, and then it's fixed. But who really wants to do this? And the answer is nobody. And who is going to do it? Probably nobody. I don't think that I would end up doing that if that was my house. I would just leave it be. But it's an important thing for you to know, so that way if you really want it to be perfect, if you don't want to lose any Legos down the side with your kids or Matchbox cars, then boom, it's taken care of. No big deal. So exterior light, moisture. So the important thing here is that if we have an exterior light, a lot of times they're going to cut a hole for that junction box to go in, and then the light mounts to that junction box. Now, if that is the case, then we either want to make sure that we have some kind of sealant, like a caulking, or a lot of these are going to have like a foam backer that whenever you tighten it on, that foam backer is going to create that water seal to prevent anything from coming in. Having it exposed is not ideal because then water gets in behind the cladding, behind the wall, and also can get into where all the electrical components are, which means the electrical components can corrode, or it means that they can have contact with water. And if they have contact with water, then what's going to happen is you could have fire risk, we could have electrocution risk, we could have a whole bunch of other risks with electrical stuff. And so we just want to put a little bit of caulking on there. And in this case, like, if you can't put caulking around there, then what you're going to do instead is that you are going to take it off. You're going to create an insert, with a piece of wood or whatever, glue that in place, and then put that back on and then caulk around it. So again, not a big deal, totally doable. Here we have a sump pump that has an open, an opening, and we don't want any of that moisture coming into the house. Everything else was sealed except for that one opening because they had run new electrical wires into it, and so we just want to put a cap on that. Easy enough to do, and those caps are readily available at most plumbing supply stores. So then, if you have a vent, because this particular vent or vents was unknown for what the purpose was, it was not readily apparent why it was not in use or what its use was, because the combustion air for fresh air to come in and basically create a convection current to constantly be putting in new fresh air for the gas appliances to be using. These were not for that. It was not for the dryer. It was not for whatever, but there were 2 vents. I don't know what they were for, but somebody had used camo tape. So camouflage tape, maybe not the best tape. There's other tapes that are better than camouflage duct tape, but they tried to cover it because it was no longer in use. However, the tape has failed. And so we just want to find out, A, why does that exist? And then B, number 2, whatever, is why did they tape it over? And is there a more permanent capping solution that could be done if it's no longer needed? So moving on, interesting part here. So we had a house, and then we had the garage, and there needs to be separation because the car can put off carbon monoxide. If the car puts off carbon monoxide, we don't want that to go back into the living space. And there could be a fire inside of the garage. There could be different chemicals like gasoline or different paints or acetones that are off-gassing, and we want that to stay in the garage. We don't want it to go over into the attic space. And so this particular one, this is the view from the attic and into the garage. Now, while in the attic, I had no clue that this was going into the garage. But then whenever you go deeper, then you're like, oh my gosh, that's the garage. And so if there is a fire, there should be like a way that that if that fire comes in, that it doesn't go into the attic space, because if it goes into the attic space, then you're going to have a bad time. And so we just need to put some drywall on there and properly tape it with fire retardant tape and drywall. That's the idea. And so then if we take a look here, this is the view from the garage. I'm not sure how permitted this particular job was, but I will tell you that this probably would not have passed just a normal inspection for a permitted job, because we really need to make sure. And you can actually see, if you look directly above me right here, you are able to see that this right here is all of the old drywall. And then they cut that out, and then they put this flue up and into the attic space. Not a great idea, not something we want to do, because we need to keep that separation. Next, trying to kill the inspector again. I don't know why people do this. This is a self-tapping screw. So self-tapping means that it is especially aggressive whenever it comes in contact with a material and will do its best to get into that material. And we don't want that to happen. What we really want to have happen is a blunt screw. So if we have an electrical wire and that screw comes in, we want it to just push that wire backwards. We do not want it to burrow its way into the wire, because then it becomes electrified. That is less than ideal. So whenever it looks like this and it is self-tapping, that is clearly a problem. So whenever you do replace them or put it back in, you have to be so careful that you aren't going to nick any wires, because that will electrify the entire box. And as soon as you touch that, you're going to have a bad time. So then we have this right here, hot and neutral reversed. The interesting thing is, whenever you get a hot and neutral reversed, if there is the very first one and first receptacle, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and we're working our way all the way across from that. If this first one is hot neutral reversed, then all the rest are going to be hot neutral reversed. So then if this one is correct and then number 3 is hot neutral reversed, then that means all the rest are going to be hot neutral reversed. And so you can go back to the one outlet that was messed up, and all that means is that somebody put the black wire where it shouldn't go and the white wire where it shouldn't go. But because we have alternating current, your appliances are going to be fine unless there is a fault. Let's say that you have a washing machine, or a dryer, a big metal appliance, and there's an issue. Normally, whenever you turn off the power or whatever, that is going to shut off the powered side. Now with a hot neutral reverse, whenever you shut off the power, it's still getting electrified, basically. And so if you touch that, you may think, if there was a fault, then you may think shutting off the power will make it safe to get there. It's not. If you want to change some electrical stuff, you could turn off the breaker and you think it's going to be safe to touch it because you turned off the breaker, and it potentially may not be. And so you just have to be very careful with hot, neutral, reversed. And of course, there are different levels of how important this is. But in general terms, we just want to get it resolved, ideally. And it should be a pretty easy fix. You find that this one that's closest to the breaker is hot, neutral, reversed, and so are all the rest. Start with the one closest to the breaker and then work your way out. There are other ways, like with some of the tools that we carry, where we can see the amount of resistance or the voltage drop, and we can look at voltage drop, and we will be able to say, okay, yeah, this is probably your most upstream outlet, which would be the one that you would fix. So we have a microwave with a plate that is missing. So whenever you have a missing microwave plate, you take a drink. Wonderful. So whenever there's a microwave plate missing, you want to get a new one installed. But same issue that we had whenever we were talking about the refrigerator is that refrigerator, you probably don't have the part available. And same here, you might not have the part available. Now, this particular part is a very common part that breaks, and just a very universally accepted part. And so you should be able to get a replacement part for this. But what good is a microwave if there is no rotating plate? I mean, it'll still microwave things, but that rotating motor is going to be spinning on whatever plate or food that you put in there, and it's just not going to work out the way you want. But it should be a relatively easy fix. Speaking about relatively easy fixes, this is not a relatively easy fix. So this particular one, at 90 feet from the house, we have the pipe is displaced. Now, the way that the pipe is displaced here isn't the worst, because as the water comes, it's going to fall into the next pipe. If it was displaced the other way, then the water would actually bury its way underneath the pipe, and it would cause possibly a sinkhole or a whole bunch of other hazards where that soil may no longer be safe, and that soil will have to be excavated, removed, and new soil put in because of a biological hazard of having all that waste being funneled into it. So in general terms, it's not the worst thing, but it definitely doesn't look right. And what will happen is we are going to get roots that are going to come in eventually, and we are going to get just a whole bunch of other problems. Now, this particular one, we located right where that was because during the inspection, the owners of the house were like, "Hey, is there any way that you can go through and just kind of fix this up for us and just pull it back, find right where that is so we know exactly where to dig?" So we took a series of photos. This is just one of the photos that basically says that this is the direction that the pipe is running, which is that line, which is kind of like right, I don't know if my finger will reach it. Nope, just off the screen. Anyway, right there, that double line is the orientation that we have going. The number up above that is basically your absolute value of the sonde that you're locating and how powerful that signal is. So on our particular thing, a 457, 458 is a very, very, very strong signal. Then you can see that we are at 4 foot 4 inches deep. And so they're at 4 foot 4 inches deep. That is the spot. We triangulated it, and that would be where they would dig. Now, granted, you are still going to call 411, and you are still going to make sure there are no other service utilities that are right there. But in general terms, they got enough photos that they can triangulate exactly where that is, so that way they're able to do the repair that is needed. Now, this particular repair, there are ways to repair this without having to dig up everything, but you are at minimum going to have to dig a 4 foot 4 inch hole that's a little bit wider, so that way you can get down in there and do some work. So it is going to be a kind of serious fix. But this particular type of pipe is an SDR35, and SDR35 is very strong, very flexible. You know, just there, it's a very, very good pipe. It's like the modern pipe for drainage, and very much ideal. And so I think the repair can be done and can be done well enough. All right, so the service panel. So this freaks people out sometimes whenever we put this in a report. But basically, if you have a Square D service panel and you have blue push buttons, those blue push buttons on a Square D service panel have been recalled. And they were recalled back in 2004. And that was from March to September of 2004 is what it is. And if you have those blue buttons, the only way to figure it out is to take off the dead front panel, to remove the breaker, and then look at the back of the breaker. And whenever you do that, then you will be able to tell when it was actually made. There's no way to tell from the front. So a lot of times it's not ideal for a homeowner to be removing breakers, and somebody such as ourselves, a home inspector, we are going to remove and look at the wires, but we are not going to start taking out circuits because that is above and beyond what a home inspection does. We really want a licensed electrician to be able to take care of that kind of stuff. So here's just another picture of what they look like. So this is just a blue reset button right there, and they seem to work whenever you press the blue reset button. But the fact is, because there was a recall, there's a risk, and because there's a risk, we just want to mitigate that risk, and let's get that out of here so that way we don't have to worry about it. So then moving on, with front load washers, they are nice because they're very water efficient. However, if you leave that door closed, what's going to happen is you're going to build up a whole bunch of mold. Whenever you build up that mold, then as you pull your clothes off, you're getting mold spores on your clothes, and your allergies are just going to go through the roof. The best thing you can do is whenever you're done is leave the door open, allow it to air out, so that way the moisture levels are lower, so that way mold is less likely to grow. And then also, that is a gasket that's in the front, and you want to go in and clean out that gasket from time to time. And there are chemicals that you can use to do so. You can even do more natural products to be able to clean that out, but that is a great place for mold and other bacteria to grow. And that is really one of the main downsides of a front load washer, is its ability or likelihood to have mold growth. And if you see that, it's the most common thing in the world. As far as like, if you have a front load washer and you tell me there's no mold on that gasket, I'm going to tell you you're either a liar or you need to get a hobby, because it's just one of those things that is just so prevalent. Just be mindful of that. So next, GFCI not resetting. So whenever we test these GFCIs, they should reset or trip. I mean, they should trip. And so whenever it doesn't trip, it's really interesting whenever it is an actual GFCI outlet and it's not tripping and it's wired correctly. And the problem with this is it gives you a false sense of security, and you don't want to have that because, you know, who hasn't wanted to clean their toaster and then they just keep it plugged in and they put it right into the water, you know, and start scrubbing it? You know, obviously that's a joke, but if an appliance were to fall into water or if there was water on the counter, then that could become electrified. And that's why we want a GFCI to do what a GFCI needs to do. And so what I would say is that this just needs to be replaced. Yes, it's a red letter item, but we want it to be replaced. $15, that's all that it takes. A regular handyman can do that. A handyman is allowed to replace a receptacle. They can't do new installs. You need an electrician to do that, but a handyman is allowed to do a one-for-one replacement. for the same thing, which is ideal. All right. This particular plumbing water heater thing, not only was it past its design life, but it was 21 years old. And this particular one, the whole outer wrapping was just ripped apart, and there were a whole bunch of other issues. I mean, if you go into a house and your water heater looks like this, no matter who you are, you can probably tell this is not the way it's supposed to be. And if something is not the way it's supposed to be, then we need to get it repaired or replaced. Now, you might remember from last month's in-service training that we had a water heater that was dropped as it was being put into the crawl space. That water heater should never have been installed. It should have been returned at a loss and then a new one installed. Whenever you see physical damage like this, it's just an indicator that things were not done the way they were supposed to be done. So again, this is past its design life. It's time to get a new one for sure. Now, could it last longer? Most definitely, but it's past its design life. So I don't know what kind of pizzas they're baking. Hopefully like really big ones, like super deep dish, you know, like just amazing pizzas, I would hope, because the pizza oven is literally falling out of the wall. Whenever you pull out that tray, the whole thing just rocks backwards and is no longer a viable option for pizza making. But it should be fixable, but I think that we're going to have to reinforce the cabinetry because I think that that's where the failure occurred. So then we come down here and we have in the heating system, there's this expansion tank and it appears as if the expansion tank has either corroded on the inside or just, you know, was poorly manufactured from the get-go. And now we have a leak that is occurring on that expansion tank. In general terms, having somebody come out to do that repair shouldn't take that long, shouldn't be that difficult. And it pretty much is just a unscrew and then rescrew, and then we're good to go, and that brand new expansion tank can be there. And we just want to make sure that expansion tank either has strapping or some other type of support to make sure that it is adequately supported so that we aren't putting unnecessary strain or stress on the pipes that are holding that up in place. So then we come down to this fireplace. And this one kind of perplexed me a little bit, but I think what it is that it's melted wax. And you can see right there in the report, question mark. And this melted wax here, the thing is that that's what it looks like to me. But if it is wax, I'm not sure of any way to actually remove that from the stone, and that stain might be there for a very long time. I'm just not sure of how to extract wax from a stone. So that's a little unfortunate because this was a beautiful, beautiful, absolutely beautiful hearth, beautiful stonework, and so that's a tough one. All right, so here's a radon report. This radon here had a maximum of 25.6 pictocuries per liter, a minimum of 4.8 pictocuries per liter, and an 11.5. Now, looking at all of this, you see the maximum temperature was 66, the minimum temperature was 54. That's an interesting spread of temperature. The relative humidity was a low of 12 all the way up to 24. Also kind of just interesting. And if you look at so all of this information is put into a graph. And what's interesting is that you will see where it spikes to its highest, which is slightly cut off on here purposely. If you were to look at that, and then you also look at your relative humidity, you look at your temperature, you look at all that, everything kind of just spikes all at the same time. Did somebody close a window? Is that why? Is that why we had cold, 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 hot? And then we had low, 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 high? Maybe. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because it's still above the 4.0 pictocuries per liter. That is the action level, the EPA's action level for when you need to put in a radon mitigation. But it's just one of those curious things of why at the very end of the test, before they knew that I was coming to pick it up, did that happen? Why did that happen? I don't know. And the answer is that there's no real way for me to say that there's foul play at all, because even if I had a camera on the device, they could have opened a window in another room or this or that or whatever. But sometimes you just look at the data and you say, that's interesting. But the reality is that we were still, regardless, we were still above the 4.0 action level, which means that mitigation should be installed. And 11.5 pictocuries per liter is kind of a big deal. And so again, it's nice because we are taking metrics every hour on the hour, and it's metrics for the radon level, atmospheric pressure, temperature, humidity, and then if the device is moved in any way, shape, or form. And then we can put all that together, and we can find the data suggesting one way or another about whether or not there was some tampering, foul play, or whatever, versus most other ways that people are able to track radon. So this is really one of the stronger or best ways to get this done. But that's radon for you. So Next would be this exterior window, and we have an egress issue. So if you're unfamiliar with egress, if there is a fire, you need to be able to get out of a bedroom. And so at every bedroom, there are rules about you have to be, I think it's like 44 inches, no more than 44 inches off the ground. You have to have a width of, 18 inches by like 24 or something like that. There's a whole bunch of, and I think it's like a 5 square foot, I don't know. That's why we have everything on our template, because then you do know. But I think it's pretty close to those numbers. But in general terms, whenever you walk into a room, you can normally spot, oh, this is going to be a problem where somebody cannot escape. And egress is your ability to get away or get out. And so on this particular window, what we have going on is that there's a bunch of snow. And so I took a picture right here, and you can see that that snow has pretty much blocked that window. Now, that particular window is a casement window, and that casement window is just going to open up and out just like that. And there's no way for it to open out like that. It can't swing out because it's going to hit into that snow, and it needs a very, very wide area to be able to do that. And so with that being said, what's the solution? Well, the solution is shovel your snow. The other solution would be put a window well. The other solution would be to replace that window with a slider that goes left and right, or a single or double hung that goes up and down. If you can do that, then you're pretty much good to go, and there's nothing that you really have to worry about. But as it stands, this is not safe. And you just have to think, if you were you at 90 years old, could you get out of here? Maybe, maybe not. You at 6 years old, there's no way. Now, you and I at our age right now, yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to get a universal key, probably a brick or something else. We're going to break that window, and just like in the movies, we're going to go around the edges, getting rid of all that broken glass, and then we're just, just like the Cirque du Soleil that, we saw last year, we're going to run and we're going to jump and we're going to get out the window. And we can do that. But think of yourself at 6 years old, think of yourself at 90 years old. And who is the most at-risk population if there was a house fire in their ability to get out. And so we really, really want to make sure that we have systems in place to make sure people can get out of houses safely. So, Federal Pacific, getting out of houses safely. We need to get this safely out of the house, because these Federal Pacifics, I believe we've touched on it several times. The one for next month is going to be amazing. I don't want to give anything away, but it's Federal Pacific, and it's in the worst condition that it could possibly be in, or worst place it could be in. So that'll be fun for next week, or for next month. But anyway, Federal Pacific stab lock. If you see this right here, you need to get it out of your house. In our area let's say down in Denver, you can get an electrician to get this taken care of for a minimum of maybe $800, where they'll take out that panel and put in a brand new panel, $800. Up here in Summit County, up in the mountains, resort town, you're talking $2,000. It's just, $1,500 maybe if you're lucky, but really $2,000 is what you're gonna have to spend to get this out. Now, once it comes out, is there any other problem? No, that's it. That's all. It's just, think of it as like a bad switch, and if that bad switch isn't, whenever you switch it off, it might not actually be off, which is not great. And then whenever you have that switch, and let's say there's just too many amps running through it, and it should turn off, it's probably not going to turn off. And so now inside of your walls, that wire has too much amperage going through it. Think of it as like a big old traffic jam, and that's creating all this heat and all this tension in the wire. So there's all this heat, and then it's just going to melt off the protective coating, and then it's just going to catch your house on fire. And that's going to be what happens with one of these Federal Pacific stab locks. Oh, or, they're loose inside of there, and so they're going to create arcing, which is where electricity jumps from one point to the other. And that arcing is going to create heat, and then you're going to catch your house on fire. And so basically, like, if we take a look at this, the breakers may be responsible for as in-depth study supports that blah, blah, blah. Breakers may be responsible for as many as 2,800 fires, 13 deaths, and $40 million of property damage every year. Every year. This isn't like, so they've run out of money in this class action lawsuit. It's gone. You aren't getting any money to replace your product. But put this into perspective. 2,800 house fires, 13 deaths, and $40 million of damage every year. It's a ticking time bomb. If you see the words stab and lock, or you see the words Federal and Pacific, just get rid of it. There's no reason for it to be in your house whatsoever. Is it a big deal? Yeah, it's a really big deal. But you can get it taken care of $2,000. Or if you're an electrician yourself, you can probably get it taken care of with parts and materials, for $300. But I mean, who here, raise your hand if you're an electrician. All right, so basically most people here are not electricians, and therefore you're going to probably spend about $2,000. So just be mindful of that. Now, receptacle, open ground. A lot of times this open ground is whenever there's a two-prong power. So we got the black wire, the white wire, the hot, the neutral, and there is no grounding wire coming through. So since that grounding wire is not coming through, that could be because that's old wiring, which was perfectly acceptable at that time period. And most things you don't need to have a ground. Like if you're charging your iPhone or your iPad, or if you're putting in your hair straightener, those use 2 prongs, and so an open ground is not a problem. But as soon as you start using appliances that have the 3 grounds, then whenever you have 3 grounds, then you really need to make sure there is a ground. Because again, if we go back to the washing machine thing, if there is a fault, it needs to go back through ground. So you got hot, neutral, and then you have ground, and you need that hot to go to ground if the neutral is broken. And if that can't happen, then we could electrify the entire dishwasher, or the entire washing machine, dryer, whatever that metal appliance is. So whenever you touch it, you're gonna have a bad time. So moving on. We have a door with some bad weather stripping, and it doesn't really matter, but we're in a high alpine environment, so in some ways it does. There was a ton of work done. This was just one little picture, but there was a ton of work done in an attempt to make the weather stripping ideal. However, it was failed and lackluster. And if you take a look at this door, looking at that picture, it was just air was just coming through. Now, one of the best ways that you can tell if your weather stripping is bad is whenever you take a look at it, is there light coming through? And if there's light coming through, then there's air coming through and there's heat going out. And so we just want to make sure that we have good weather stripping. It's a couple dollar investment. It's not a big deal. So water corrosion, severe, whatever, water heater, the corrosion on the pipes. So this right here could be water-related issue. It could also be a galvanic reaction. And so what you need there would normally be what's referred to as a dielectric union. And a dielectric union makes it that the either stainless steel, brass, galvanized metal, whatever, and copper, whatever the 2 different metals are. If they're 2 different metals, then they're going to be exchanging electrons back and forth, and to the point that there becomes corrosion. And so with that being said, a dielectric union allows you to thread that onto both sides, and there's like a plastic gasket in between the 2 that prevent the metals from ever being in direct contact, but still create a perfectly good seal. So moving on from there, we have a heater that is past design life. So this thing was 26 years old, this heater. Let me just scroll up a little bit so you can see that 26 years old statement. So this thing was 26 years old. And the thing about it being 26 years old is, does it need replaced? Yes. How much is that going to cost? Probably 10 grand. Okay, so then your options are, as a new home buyer, is if you want to negotiate it, then that's between you and your realtor. We don't get into any of that. But let's say that you want to negotiate it, and the people tell you, you can go pound sand. We aren't going to help you with anything. It is what it is. Buy the house or don't buy the house. We got 10 other offers. This market is hot. We aren't going to do anything, and we don't care what you have to say about it because, it is what it is. Okay, so then what do? Do you just say, okay, then we aren't going to buy the house? Then that's silly. That is just silly. And the reason that's silly is because what do you need? A new thermocouple, possibly. You might need, some couple of components inside, the mechanicals. Maybe a new fan at some point. This thing is 26 years old. If you replace it today, it's going to cost you 10 grand. Now, if they replace it, that's awesome. Yeah, get them to replace it. That would be great. But if you replace this, that's 10 grand. If you replace it today. If you get another 5 years out of this thing, it's 10 grand in 5 years. If you get okay, so this is embarrassing, and I'm afraid to tell people about this because it's personal, but my furnace is from 1973. The furnace in my house, a home inspector, the owner of a home inspection company, my furnace is from 1973. That's an old furnace. That's like almost a 50-year-old furnace. So we're talking about a furnace here that's 26 years old, and we're talking about my furnace, which is almost 50 years old. And you might be like, John, what are you doing? If you today spend 10 grand, you get a new furnace, and the life expectancy of a furnace is 15 years. If today you spend 10 grand. Now, if that furnace at 26 years old can make it to 50 years old, wow, you just went another 25 years. And then in 25 years, you just spent 10 grand. It doesn't matter when you spend the 10 grand. What I'm telling you is if they tell you to go pound sand and that you have to keep that heater and whatever, that doesn't mean that on move-in day, you have to throw it out and replace it. It just means take care of it. And if you take care of it like I take care of mine, you might actually have a furnace that's 50 years old. You might have a furnace that's older than you and still performing better than a lot of brand spanking new furnaces that I see that only last 5 years, and then they have major issues. And so if you have something that is still just plugging along, doing a great job, then I don't care what it has to say right there on the label. It is it operating the way that it's supposed to? Is it doing what it's supposed to? There's nothing to be fearful about, and you're going to be just fine. Anyway, that was a soapbox, and I'm going to get off of it, and I'm going to take a drink. All right. So exterior structure, hangers inadequate. All right, so hangers inadequate is kind of an understatement on this particular build. But, I mean, you can obviously see that that hanger that is supposed to hold that joist is kind of not doing what it's supposed to do. So we just want to make sure we nail that back in. We're good to go, and that will probably resolve that particular issue. But there are more issues than that. There were multiple hangers that were not hanging the way they were supposed to hang. We had a vertical post, and then all the weight right here, and it was just bolted in like this. And so those bolts are just going to fall right out, and the whole thing's just going to fall. Or if they shear, meaning they just go like this, then the whole deck collapses while your entire wedding party's on it, and everybody has a bad time, and you wind up in the news. So it's one of those things that can be resolved, and there's some very easy, very, very easy solutions to these. So yes, it's in red, but if you have a hammer, nails, and some extra wood, you got this. It's going to be just fine, but you have to be mindful of what the actual underlying issue is. This is actually the same deck. And on this deck, you might know that whenever you're a certain height, you can't allow anything that is larger than 4 inches to pass through the guardrail. And so if something larger than 4 inches passes through the guardrail, then it could fall off and it could get hurt. Here, a small child, a small adult could fall right through this. And the question that you have to ask yourself is, are you comfortable with the liability? And if the answer is yes, I'm totally comfortable with the liability, then great, because this was a beautiful deck. And at this particular property, there were wild turkeys. This was over in Vail, Colorado. I did not know that we had wild turkeys at that elevation. And it was amazing, like just so many wild turkeys. It was beautiful. And right off that deck, if there were slats there, you wouldn't have been able to see any of them. So I completely understand why you would have a deck like this, but as an inspector, I'm still going to call it out because even though it is aesthetically pleasing, it's not safe. And just because, seatbelts weren't a thing in a car, we've now learned that they're safe. Just because the steering column would go into your chest whenever you had a collision, we now know airbags are better. That doesn't mean, that because you're driving an old car, that you have to put an airbag in it. It just means understand the risk that you are taking on by having an older, and I think this house, I can't remember exactly, but it was I want to say it was 200 and something years old, and they had taken it from the South Platte in Denver and then brought it up to Vail. Gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. But it's the aesthetic, and I understand it. So if you want to drive around in an old car, know that it's probably not going to have a seatbelt, it's not going to have an airbag, and are you comfortable with that? Are you okay with that? Or do you want to make some updates? And in this case, I would leave it just the way that it is. Because 9 months out of the year, you're going to fall right into the snow and you're going to be okay. So anyway, we put it in the report just to make sure that everybody is aware, but there's really nothing to worry about. Now, whenever we have a scorched outlet, there might be something to worry about. And so why did it scorch? Why did it arc? And that could be because there's a defect on the internal mechanisms. And if that is the case, are we having continued arcing? Or was it just whenever I pulled out that outlet because it had not clearly disconnected and then it created that arcing situation? But Either way, just update the outlet. There's no reason, because once you have that arcing, then there could be material that has been lost, and now I may not have as good of a connection as I once had, and so therefore more arcing, more heat, more risk of fire. So just get it replaced. It's just a few bucks. All right, these stairs, woo lordy, these stairs were awesome, and I feel so bad. I feel so bad because when people take pictures of houses because they want to sell houses, there's a lot of things that they don't include in their pictures, such as the things that they don't want you to know about. And so whenever you show up for the day of the inspection and you see something, it can be extremely disheartening whenever your expectation is not met. This particular set of stairs was the most unsafe set of stairs that I have ever inspected. Since the start of the business in 2018, all the way to now, 2021, this is the most unsafe set of stairs I have ever seen. So let's take a few of these pictures. I don't know if this picture does it justice, but these stairs are steep. And whenever I say steep, you may as well be on a submarine and with a ladder. The other issue is they were so narrow that I couldn't walk up with my tool belt. So my tool belt, doesn't stick out too far past me, but my shoulders were touching on the way up. And my tool belt, I had to turn sideways just to get up these stairs to the primary bedroom, the primary bedroom, the main master suite is up these stairs. All right, fine, no big deal. I don't know how they got a bed up there. It blows my mind. So let's take a look at some of these other issues. So we can tell that it's steep. Now we also take a look at this, and you see how you can kind of, this side, there we go. You see how right over there we go, that you can see all of these stairs, the nosing of the nose of the stairs, how it's kind of like a straight line all the way down to the floor. And then you get this one right here. And this one right here is not the same as all the rest. So your first step to go and fall down the stairs, or your last step as you come up the stairs, is not the same as the other steps. Okay, so why is that a problem? Well, it's not a problem if you are in medieval times and you build a castle. You might purposefully, whenever you have like an area that you want as your final, place to be safe, right? So you can pour in the tar and you can stab them and like roll down some stuff down the stairs, whatever. You want to have a dark hallway, which this was a dark hallway because it wasn't properly lit. Then once it's dark, you want it to be narrow. So then, whatever. And then you want to have the stairs different shapes. So that way, whenever a knight is walking up in their armor and they trip, you can hear them clinking and clunking. And okay, we're going to release the really hot oil and then we're going to, protect ourselves at our castle. So if you're really into, LARPing, live action roleplay, if you love LARPing, oh my God, these are the stairs for you. These are the stairs for you if you love LARPing, because it is the same thing as a castle and in the way that they used to protect castles. But for us in our modern day and age, if you take your first step, you expect your second step to be the same, and then you expect your third step to be the same. So first step is one way, second step is another, and then technically then the third step is another. So the risk of tripping and falling down these stairs is just astronomical. So then you take a look and it's like, okay, cool. So I'm just gonna, middle of the night, I need a glass of water. You know how I get. I've already had, a couple drinks. And so I need a glass of water. That's what's going to happen because, I talk in my sleep just like I talk right now. So and actually just since I'm talking. Cool. So you get up in the middle of the night. You need to go get a glass of water. The space around the edge of that bed, I think, was 8 inches. That is 8 inches for you to not fall down the stairs when you're getting out of bed to go get a glass of water. 8 inches. The other thing is you see how that baluster, that guardrail isn't quite all the way to the corner there? Whenever you're walking, you could walk in a straight line and fall down to the second step. It was just ridiculously unsafe, but that's fine because then you can grab the handrail. You see we have a handrail right here, so you can just grab the handrail. But then if you take a look, the handrail is intersected by the baseboard radiant heat, and then it goes to a totally different handrail on a totally different angle. And so not only was this one, on a different angle than the other one was, but it was also on a different plane, meaning that even if your hand went down, it wouldn't be able to go down into the next one. It would literally miss the handrail because it was sunken into the wall. And then you put into how small it was. It was just amazing. And I've gone way too far on this one, but basically, and there was no egress, there was no nothing. There was a soft spot in the floor because where they used to have the attic access stairs that went up to the attic, they just covered that over with a single sheet of plywood, and it was just not well built, not safe for people to occupy. The only window that actually opened, this is amazing. I wish I had a photo of this right now. The only window that actually opened, you would have to go in a straight line from that arrow to that window, and then whenever the window opened, it had this much space. I couldn't even get my head through that window to safely escape in case of a fire. There were some issues with this particular house, but the unfortunate thing, sorry, I digressed. The unfortunate thing is that nobody disclosed this. Nobody said that this was the way that it was, and if it weren't, thankfully the buyer was there with us. But we do a great inspection. We mention things like this, and we do 360-degree photos. So you would have a full 360-degree understanding of each room, multiple photos per some rooms, multiple photos. And hopefully, even if you weren't there on the day of the inspection, you'd know that, hey, this wasn't what I expected whenever I signed the agreement. And it was just really unfortunate. I felt so bad because they had their heart set on it. And then whenever they saw this, it was just tough. Keep your house safe. That's really all I got to say about that. Sorry, I digressed. So this one right here, we have a sump pump and it is draining into the sewage, which is great. That's wonderful. That gives it a place to go. That'll work, whatever. It's not ideal for a lot of reasons, but anyway, it's whatever. So now we have that pipe coming out, and so are the sewer gases. And there needs to be like a P-trap or something else to prevent to prevent the gases from coming back, or it needs to be more of a sealed system that has some type of like a P-trap, well, not S-trap, but a P-trap. So that way sewer gases can't come out. That's what we want. So whenever we look at drainage stuff, we also think of not where is the water going to go, but where is the gas going to come back out. And in this case, there were definite risks of having sewer gas entering the house, which then, could be flammable, unrealistic that it would be, but could be flammable, and really will just smell and be a health hazard. So poor workmanship on the plumbing. This was just, to me, that I laughed out loud, and I don't laugh very much. And so for me to be on the job site and just laugh out loud, that is something. Now, a few things to keep in mind about this. One is all the plumbing was phenomenal. It was all amazing, except for these two things that were clearly done by a non-professional. First, let's take a look at that plumbing pipe. This rip. Right? Nope, I can't get to it. Too bad. That's the problem with green screens. But basically, the pipe that is the highest red pipe, and then it comes down, and to the left, it comes down to this little expansion tank. And that gray expansion tank allows that whenever the water heats up and it expands and then cools down and contracts, it gives that water a place to go. There's a bladder there with an air, with basically an air on one side and then water on the other side. So water cannot be compressed, but the air can be compressed. And so as that water expands because it's hot, then the air compresses, and then vice versa. And so you really want this thing to be strapped and secured. It's not. I mean, it's secured against a ladder, so that's good. But then you follow that up, and none of the, like you see how it's like sagging down? None of the plumbing had been secured on that PEX, which is fine. It works. It's doing what it's supposed to do, but it's going to fail. And so it's just one of those things. Get it secure, get it done right. The next thing is, you probably heard me talk a lot about temperature pressure relief valves, TPRVs. And what they do is that they are a valve that is going to open whenever there's too much pressure or too high of a temperature. And so then what will happen is that at, let's say, 210 degrees Fahrenheit, enough that in a couple seconds you can get third-degree burns. Very, very, very dangerous to have that hot of water. 210 degrees Fahrenheit or 150 PSI is going to come through this red PEX pipe. And why this is so funny to me is, one, we are discharging more than 6 inches off the ground. So, it can spray onto your legs and not just onto your feet, which would be very, very bad. But also, the thing about the shark bite fitting is that the shark bite fitting, the pipe that's going up can rotate like this, which means that the pipe that's going like this can rotate like that. And if that pipe can rotate in that way, then this thing can just spin around like a pinwheel. And if you're having an event where this boiler has created too hot of a situation and is overly heating this water, and that temperature pressure relief valve has to release 210 degree Fahrenheit water at 150 PSI, and it is just pushing through this system, and you have a pinwheel that is throwing that super scalding, dangerous hot water, you gotta be kidding me, right? So if this was a professional plumber that did this, then shame on you. I think that this was probably done by a homeowner. Professional plumbers aren't too keen on using press fit, plumbing. So hopefully this was the homeowner that did this. But, and then whenever you talk about how PEX isn't actually rated for 210 degrees Fahrenheit, it's just a bad solution all around. It should be a rigid pipe. It's not. Bad job. But fixable? Oh yeah, totally. How much in supplies? Well, you can do a thread on with that, with copper, and you can get this thing completely done, good to go. Supply wise, less than $40, but this was the easiest approach that could be done, but it is also the most dangerous. So just one of those things. And I feel so bad that I'm just soapboxing right now. I'm just going nonstop, but hey, that's what we're here for. So now you understand the reasons as to why this is a problem. And I apologize to any future employees. This is what you have to deal with. I apologize. I just talk a lot. That's just what happens. So if we take a look at the window egress issue, so this one here, the issue is not that we have a well. We have a well that we can get out, a window well that we can get out of, but they put so many personal items on top of it that I lifted up one side of it, and standing on top of it, I could barely get a corner to lift. So underneath, if I ever had to escape, there's no way I could push it above my head and somehow escape. There's just absolutely no way. So just one of those things to be mindful of. On the inside, people are always worried about cracks. Whenever there are two different types of materials, they will expand and contract at different rates. Now, there are things that can be done, a plastic strip basically, that you can put around, and so that way you don't have to have caulking or chinking or anything like that. And that plastic strip just goes in, adheres to the drywall and then just creates like a nice seam, a nice finish to the edge of the drywall. That's one option. The other option is you can apply caulking that is really able to expand and contract. And so a lot of the cracks that you're going to see on walls really aren't a big deal, but people are always worried. But if there's two different types of materials, you're pretty much guaranteed to have a crack, because as temperature increases, expansion contraction is different. As humidity increases, expansion contraction is different. So just be mindful of that. All right, attic structure. Whenever you have like a townhome and there's one unit and then there's another unit, in between those units, there should be a firewall. And these folks almost built the firewall perfectly, except that they stopped a little bit shy. And so they built the firewall except for probably 4 sheets of drywall that they did not put up. And that then negates any benefit that you would have had from any of that drywall. It needs to be all the way up to the ridge line. And so as far as like fire safety is concerned, this will not cut it. But the thing is, why is this way? Is it because they did blown-in insulation, which they did, and they just wanted to make sure it didn't fly all over the place? Yes, sure, maybe. Was a firewall required at the time of the construction? Maybe, maybe not. But can we make this better? We can. However, is it you that makes it better, or the HOA, or is it just a nice thing to know? And so it's probably just a nice thing to know. I don't think anybody's going to change it, but just something to be mindful of. All right, so we had some displaced pipes, more sewer stuff, and then you can see here that because of these pipes being displaced, what's coming into it are roots. And so we have a clay piping system, and we have roots coming into it. Not only are the pipes displaced, but the roots come in, and then what they will do is they will just clog that drain, and they're going to take all of that water away from, instead of it going down, they're going to try to absorb as much of that water as they can. And then what you'll get is a backup into your house. Now with clay pipes, you can use a rotary, like a roto-rooter to push down and clean it out. The problem would be that with clay pipes that are displaced is that rotary blade might bind on the displaced pipe and then break that displaced pipe, causing even more of an issue and a potential collapse of dirt and soil and stuff. So you really have to be careful with roots with displaced pipes. So just be mindful of that. Okay, S-trap. So basically an S-trap, as the picture would show, is going to pretty much siphon out all of that water and then allow sewer gases to come back in. So as we had described earlier, if there are sewer gases, we like to have an idea of where that sewer gas is coming from, going to, and then that way we are very much aware of are we putting things into the house that should not be coming into the house? And so this S-trap can be converted into a P-trap most of the time relatively easily, but we don't want that S-trap the way that it is, because it's going to just suck all that water right out of there. And if it does with that siphon effect, then you're going to get sewer gases coming into your house. Again, methane gases could be combustible, highly unlikely, but you're then going to have a terrible smell. And every time you walk past that room, you're going to say, why does this room smell so bad? And then you add more water to the drain and it sucks it all out. And it's just going to be a nonstop type of issue. So fireplaces. A lot of these fireplaces normally have like ornamental wooden accents or other things that you would hold on to. And this particular fireplace, it was too good of an example to just pass up. It was missing probably 4 or 5 of these wooden handles. You can see 3 circles right now, but 4 or 5 of these handles that are just missing. And that is, not a big deal because they do sell replacement parts for this, but it takes time and effort out of your day, and that's less than ideal. So this particular shower head had some LED lights, which is pretty cool, but the real issue was that it is a waterfall shower head, and there was basically like the whole back section was not doing the waterfall stuff the way it should. Now, with this being an LED lit waterfall shower head, it's probably more expensive to replace. And in addition to that, I don't know if it is an internal clogging that is repairable, because you can sometimes put like a CLR, like a calcium lime and rust removal. You can take the shower head off and then just fill it with CLR and set it right there in the tub or the shower, and let it kind of work its way through, and then flip it over, scrub, put some more in, scrub. Do that a couple times, and then in a day, put it back on, and then you're ready to rock and roll, and hopefully it'll be working. Now, if that is not the case, then this particular shower head is probably going to be a little bit more expensive to repair. All right, so here's some structure issues. This is the thing that Shay found, and not great. So there was a lot of step cracking on this particular property because you had concrete masonry units, thinking about cinder blocks. And they are stacked, like Legos would be stacked. And whenever it is a crack that just kind of steps downward, then that crack is an indication of some type of settlement, movement, whatever it may be. In the photo that is directly above my head, the highest one up there, that particular photo, what you can see is that we have a main support beam. And what they did was that post, they just stacked up a bunch of wood that has since fallen over. And because of that, there were issues all throughout the house, and that is less than ideal. So this is a very, very major issue found in the crawl space that needs to be resolved. Now, can it be resolved? Yeah, it can probably be resolved. If there were tile floors, all the tiles probably going to be cracked or damaged whenever they take a jack and jack it back up. And then whenever they jack it back up, all those tiles are probably going to pop or break. But if it's wood or carpet, then yes, we can probably save this pretty easily. But it was just done incorrectly. And everything was setting on the dirt. They never poured a concrete footer, nothing. And so, of course, like, no, that's not how you do a foundation. That's just not ideal. Win some, lose some, I guess. So then we had all kinds of exposed wires down there. And I don't know, again, why are people trying to kill their inspectors? You know, just not ideal. Electrical wires that are abandoned. Now, these particular wires were not live. Otherwise, this would be a red issue. But it's just, if somebody flips a switch, somebody flips a breaker, whatever, all of these wires could become live and not only be an electrocution hazard, but could also be a fire hazard as well. So just, you know, people, come on now. Let's do it. Let's do it right. Whenever it comes to electrical, it just seems like everything's done incorrectly. But we want, instead of putting duct tape over top of something that you can put your finger in and have it kill you, we really want to put filler plates. They're like $1 a piece. They're plastic inserts that just pop right into that place. And if we can put that filler plate in, then that means that we are definitely going to keep everybody safe, that whenever you go to open something up, you aren't accidentally going to have something touch the inside. And are you going to touch the inside? No, you're never going to touch the inside. But if it's predictable, it's preventable. So if we can predict that it's going to happen, then we can prevent it from happening. And that's the whole objective. So moving on to the service panel now, same house. This particular service panel had live wires in it that were just exposed. And if they were to be moved and they touch, see, because what will happen is somebody will disconnect the wiring and be like, oh, it's fine at the box. You know, like, okay, we are no longer using this circuit. We are going to disconnect it. Great. But then down the road, somebody's like, oh, and then we'll just connect this one here and this one here. And then now, you know, we connected all the wires. And that's like somewhere else in the house. And now we have a live wire inside of the service panel. It's just, anytime that there's a wire inside of a service panel, just put a wire nut on it. You know, there are better ways, but just put a wire nut on it. That's the bare minimum to make sure that you don't kill our inspectors. That would be great if you could not do that. And so, yeah, live wire, just put a wire nut on it. That's all you need to do. Okay, here, Shay and I were talking about this one quite a bit. Apparently, you know, okay, so there's a lot of things to unpack in this particular issue. So the things to unpack here is that we have an unconditioned crawl space. And so that's fine, unconditioned crawl space. So just think of where we are, high alpine environment. There's a lot of winter, 9 months of it, and an unconditioned crawl space. And we're taking our main heating supply through a metal. And if we know about metal, metal is able to conduct not only electricity, but also heat. So now it's a good conductor of heat. So now we are losing efficiency because all of that heating from our ductwork is now going through an unconditioned space without any insulation on it, any kind of wrapping or anything. So we're losing all that efficiency. And then there's I guess an opening, you know, like the pipe had kind of come apart. And so what would be appropriate would be to put it back in place, rivet it, tape it, and then be done with it. But instead they decided to do a spray foam insulation. Now, the problem with the spray foam insulation is that they had done it on the exterior, hoping that it would, you know, go into the interior a little bit. But whenever we talk about the rating of HVAC systems, there's a certain amount of airflow that is supposed to go through that ductwork. And if we are putting an expanding foam into there, how much of that foam went in? Is there any way to know? And the answer is no, there is no way to know. And so we now have a huge issue because we have just reduced the amount of airflow that can go through. We've effectively done nothing. And the easiest thing would have just been to put it together and get a metal tape. You know, it's a shiny kind of silver tape for HVAC systems, and put that on and be done with it. Riveting it first would be better. So if you were to fix this, what you do is you separate the pipes, you get rid of all that spray foam insulation, you put it back together, you'd rivet it in place, or, you know, secure it in some way, maybe even just tape by itself. And then you're going to put a jacket on it that has insulation and a vapor barrier on it, and then you're good to go. Then the next thing they did is that, why did this happen in the first place? Why do we have this problem? Because it's like, yes, we can address this one problem, but why did the problem occur in the first place? And the reason the problem occurred in the first place is because of inadequate strapping. And so, okay, what is inadequate strapping? What that means is that we have a large pipe and it just is touching the ground or has fallen onto the ground. We should have taken strapping. And so depending on the type of pipe, because if we're doing duct work or if we're doing steel galvanized, if we're doing electrical, there are different increments at which you should strap it up to make sure it can support its own weight. And really good rule of thumb is whenever you have a joint, you really want to strap it up at that joint. And the reason you strap it up at that joint is to make sure that that joint does not have any kind of, movement such as this joint had. And so if you look at the next picture over, they just had some blocks. And so they just kind of, put the blocks there and then I feel it almost looks like they adhered it with spray foam insulation, which is sticky, but like, come on now. And all that they needed to do was take a strap and then put either a nail or a screw into the floor joists above it, and that will hold it into place. And now we don't even have to do metal strapping anymore. They have like this this cloth strapping that is just phenomenal. And that's the easiest stuff you could use ever. And that would have been the right way to take care of it. It's just interesting what some of the solutions are. All right. If you walk out onto a deck, and as you step out onto that deck, the whole thing kind of just moves on you, that's probably because the deck was built wrong. And this particular deck was built wrong. And what you have is they put a hot tub onto this deck. Now, a hot tub, basically what can happen with this hot tub is that it can weigh easily 7,000, 8,000 pounds. And then we have just normal construction, just a normal build, and it is not designed to support this. And so not only will there be sagging, there can be deflection or movement of those joists. They need to be way more frequent or sistered, doubled up. There's just so much that needs to be done because this hot tub, if you step onto a deck and there's any kind of movement or wobble, then what that means is the fasteners are not tight and they will pull out. And if they pull out, that whole deck is going to go down. So if you're putting a hot tub on, don't just put a hot tub on your deck because you think it will look nice or be fun or whatever. You need to make sure your deck can support the weight of a hot tub because those things are heavy. So just keep that in mind. This particular deck is a death trap. So now now everybody knows. So right here, this is another interesting thing. So the wall, and in this one picture, the main picture here is not really the one that shows the bulk of the issue. Like the other ones actually show the issue much, much better. But basically this wall should be completely flat and it's pushing like this into the living space. And then that's where we're starting to get that crack. And then the crack goes up, all over the place and not ideal. So we really, there are some current concerns about this particular foundation. And whenever you see stuff like that, is that a end game? Are we done? No. So why would something like that push? Well, normally it's because there's some kind of water that is not going where it needs to go. And so we're getting this like hydraulic effect where the water is pushing it. And because the water is pushing it, it's pushing it at forces that are just so much greater. Like if you've ever seen an old water tower, made of wood slats, you're going to see a metal ring all the way at the top, then another metal ring, a few feet down, and then two more metal rings, and then just a couple inches down, another two more metal rings, and then like an inch down, like four more metal rings. And the reason why is because there's not very much pressure at the top, but as you come down, that pressure is just exponential. And so if we have poor drainage on that property, then of course we're going to be pushing with a hydraulic effect, pushing that foundation wall in, and that's why we're getting all these cracking type issues. So this particular issue does not look like it's just a settlement issue. It looks like it is a saturated soil issue, which could be resolved by digging out around, putting in a drainage system, and covering that back up. And then, do we need to do anything about the wall? Well, no. Just because it's cracked doesn't necessarily mean that it's lost its ability to, support the house. However, if it is cracked and a structural engineer says, "Ooh, it has lost, 30% of its ability to hold up this house," then yeah, we have a problem and we need to take care of something. But in this particular case, I think that we're catching it soon enough that we can just take care of the underlying issue. And again, we aren't going to just paint this and make it look pretty. We want to figure out why did it happen in the first place. And I think that's going to be because we have saturated soil and we just need to get rid of that water. So then as I move my way down, Handrails. So there, this you can just go diving way off, but you need to make sure a 4-inch sphere doesn't go through. You need to make sure that, like in this one picture, there's almost like 10 inches worth of space. And, if a kid has a toy fall off and they reach for the toy, the kid could go down not down the stairs, but down the side of the stairs, which would be very, very bad. Very bad. So, and again, like, does it matter to you? Well, no, but if it's predictable, it's preventable. Is it going to happen? Well, probably not, no, but if it's predictable, it's preventable. And what do you have to do? Put in another couple pieces of wood. It's like wood chop. You measure twice, you cut once, and then you just put it in with a couple nails. As long as that can support 50 pounds, each baluster just needs to support 50 pounds. And if it can do that, then you're golden. Nothing really to worry about. So then we come down here, and we have some discoloration in the attic space. And so this really was contributed, it appears, to moisture. And so in general terms, fiberglass can't grow mold because fiberglass is not something that mold can grow on. However, any kind of dust, dirt, debris, anything like that can grow mold. And this discoloration where it really did appear as if it was a moisture-related type issue. And so that is obviously something that we want to resolve and get taken care of. And whenever there is a moisture issue, whenever there is a risk of mold, you have to first stop the moisture intrusion, whatever that may be, whether it's coming from a pipe, whether it's coming from a leak, whatever it may be. You want to take care of that moisture issue. Then you want to remove anything that has been affected. So if we need to, remove bad insulation and put in new insulation, we then want to put some kind of protectant to neutralize the mold. And then maybe we have to repaint it or do whatever, and then we're good to go. So anything can be fixed. So like whenever you're looking at our inspection reports, anything can be fixed. Remember, the house is built by a person, which means a person can fix it. So just something to be mindful of. This one here, this is a fabulous one. If you're going to build yourself a deck, you got to do things right. Okay. So first off, this particular deck, the support beams were not put in the way they're supposed to. Now there has to be anchoring. You need to anchor to the ground, to the post, from the post to the beam, from the beam to the deck material, from the deck material to the guardrail materials. All of this needs to act as one unit. It needs to be anchored and secured together. If it is not anchored and secured together, then one piece can fail. Now, I'm not sure about you with how straight you're seeing, but if you can see this one directly above me right here, that is not straight. That is not straight up and down. That is not plumb. And what that means is that there has been shifting and movement of that deck, which means that that deck is very much at risk of collapse. And that is super duper scary. There are things that can be done to fix this, but right now, as it stands, I would not feel safe being on this deck. If you invited me over I think maybe this would just be a good policy in general. If you invite me over for barbecue on your back deck, I'm just going to go take a look at the bottom of the back deck before I go out on it, because the number of decks that we have seen that are inadequately built, it's just terrible. But I mean, how much is a new deck? Like 40 grand? Like nobody wants to spend that kind of money. And so then people try to do it themselves. And there's a reason that we are paying people as much money as we do to build a deck, because there are so many guidelines. Like as we talked at the beginning of this this in-service training, there are 4,500 deficiencies that I added to our inspection report. There are so many things that I just clumped together. And what I mean by that is the number of ways that you can do vertical support beams incorrectly, the number of ways you can do anchoring incorrectly, the number of ways you can build a deck incorrectly. I could probably, just on deck construction, have over 1,000 deficiencies just on deck construction, which is why we consolidate some things. But I have seen way too many people build decks incorrectly, and it would not be a bad idea for you to just take a look underneath your deck and say, that looks homemade. If you look at something and you can say, that looks homemade, that just is homemade, then it's time to get a professional to get them to either rebuild or repair the issues that were made. If it looks homemade, it was homemade, and that means it's probably not following standard business, standard building practices. So just be mindful of that. So then on this deck, again, whenever we have 4 stairs or more, this right here, because of the amount of snow, we can see we put a little disclaimer in here, that because of the amount of the snow, it was hard to say, but it was right at 30 inches. And so here's the deal. We had said, I'm going to put myself in the shoes of myself at 6 years old. I'm going to put myself in the shoes of myself at 90 years old. And what we have is 6 years, 90 years, whatever it may be, is that if I'm 90 years old and I fall off of your deck at 29 inches and I break my hip, I have a broken hip. If I'm 90 years old and I fall off your hip at 30, and I fall off your deck at 30 inches and I break my hip, I still have a broken hip. The fact is that whenever we're splitting hairs and we're saying, well, it was 29 3/4 of an inch, so we didn't need to put in a guardrail. Why? Why not? Why not? I mean, if you think that you could put a chair on the edge of that deck and somebody can't just tip back and fall off the edge and get hurt, just put on that guardrail. Just do it. Just do it. If you're at 30 inches, you need to. If you're at 29 3/4, you don't have to, but you really should, because if grandpa has to go for hip surgery at the age of 90, which we all know that's a bad outcome, then what's the difference of 1/4 of an inch? What's the difference of whatever? So on this particular one, not only do we need a handrail because there's more than 4 steps, but we also need to have a guardrail because we're right at 30 inches. And that's right at 30 inches with the snow. And so getting an accurate measurement, yeah, it was difficult, but we're pretty sure that it's time for a handrail on this particular one. And other things that you can do is if you don't want to obstruct your view, you can actually just get a whole bunch of dirt and then have them regrade around that deck. Now the problem is, if you do that, water will come down through your deck, and then if it's sloping away from your house, so all the water can go away from your house. So here's your house, and the water can slope away from your house, but then you build up a wall, and then you slope away from that wall where the deck would be, then all that water gets trapped here, goes into the soil, and then it is going to make some issues for your foundation. So if you are going to add soil, you have to add drainage as well. Just be mindful. But anyway, that's that. And then this one here, I think this is our ender. So this chimney is definitely unsafe and inadequate. Not only do we have some issues with the masonry that's on top of that chimney, all the chimneys were capped. And whenever the chimneys are capped, there's obviously a reason why they capped it. Most of the time, you're going to have some kind of clay or masonry on the inside of that flue, and that is guaranteed to have cracks or gaps between each course that they did to build it up. If that is the case, then we are going to get super hot gas going into parts that are combustible, and then we are going to have a chimney fire. And if we have a chimney fire, then that is a very, very bad thing. So what can we do? Well, we can put a gas fire insert. We can install just a regular stainless steel flue, but all of those options are kind of expensive. And sometimes in order to install that stainless steel flue, you actually have to tear down the entire chimney just to be able to install it, because there are limitations to how large the firebox is, so how big of a fire you can have. There has to be a chimney that has the appropriate size, so that way we can have enough exhaust going and doing what it's supposed to do. So especially if it is square, so if we have a square and then I put a circle in, there's no way that I can have the appropriate amount of airflow to make that safe. So could I reduce the size of the firebox? Yeah, I could reduce the size of the firebox to put a smaller pipe down the chimney, but a lot of times you might have to just tear down the entire chimney, which would be less than ideal, obviously. But the other thing to keep in mind is that, okay, if you decide, well, we're not going to do anything. They told us it doesn't work, so whenever we sell it, it doesn't work. Well, what if the market isn't as good for sellers as it is right now? What if the market is a buyer's market and you're trying to sell your house? You're either going to have to come down in price to get the chimney fixed, because somebody's going to say, well, I don't want to deal with that problem in the future. Yes, I know that you didn't ask them to fix the problem, but I'm telling you to fix the problem or else I won't buy your house. If it becomes a buyer's market, then this particular type of an issue could be an issue down the road that could reduce the value of your home by up to $40,000 to do, a repair or something that could be very invasive, or it could be an easy repair and be like $8,000. I don't know, and I'm not the one that does the repairs, but I am telling you that if there is an issue, it's always ideal to get the issue resolved, because if the issue is not resolved, then you're probably going to have to pay for it one way or the other. So just something to think about. But anyway, that pretty much wraps up everything that we have going on with this particular in-service training. And thank you if you watched the whole thing. My employees, thank you for dealing with me. 2 times speed, I highly recommend. I should have said it at the beginning, but if you made it this far, the next time, just watch it at 2 times speed. You'll get used to it. Your brain will be ready. You're going to pull in all that information, and it's half as long. And so highly, highly, highly recommended. But overall, thank you guys. Thank you to my inspectors who make this business possible. Thank you to all the realtors that make this business possible. And in general terms, I think this in-service training, I think our ability to help educate other inspectors that are in the industry, our ability to educate our inspectors and homeowners and just let people know what's going on, I think that that's the reason why we do this. And I think we're going to continue doing this for the foreseeable future, because I think that it is a strong benefit to our guys to be able to have a great understanding of what's going on. So I'd like to say thank you for watching. If you have any additional questions, or if you'd like to schedule a home inspection, please visit 2moosehomeinspections.com. Have a wonderful day.